in this creative field, the best thing you can do is start making stuff as soon as possible. Don't look to other people to save your career, to start your career. You start it, and if you're doing that regularly, like, it will start to go above the noise.
Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kavatoff and Anthony Epp, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and real-world strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made.
So if you're serious about making movies, hit follow or subscribe. It helps us keep this going. And if you like what you hear, spread the word, share the episode, leave a comment, and help more indie filmmakers find Off the Lot. Let's dive in. What's new? What's exciting?
Everything is exciting. It's been a couple of weeks of, you know how sometimes you line up a whole bunch of pieces and then all of a sudden things just start falling into place. So we had a number of meetings for the Quiet Canadians. We've been meeting with our director of photography to kind of talk like high level vision and
Cool.
getting like some interesting ideas for like how to shoot a scene and stuff like that. Not getting to the technical of like what lens to use or anything like that, but just more talking in broad strokes. We had some investor meetings. We've started talking with casting director about some of the cast for the film. So that was Quiet Canadians. And then we have another feature project that we have been brought on for that is getting very close to green light for the summer. We're helping produce a documentary feature.
Oh, really? That's
So
great.
yeah,
Wow.
and it all just like in the last 2 weeks. So clear the decks and start
Yeah.
making things happen.
It's funny how
Ken,
that
what's
works,
going
where
on?
like it
Oh,
could
go.
be like super quiet for a while, right? And then all of a sudden, another project just comes out of the blue and, lands on your plate. So that's cool.
Yeah, a lot of this has been discussions that have been in the works for a while, and then it just seems like the end of March, first week of April became kind of like where everybody started going, "Oh, okay, so we need this now for this, or we need to go forward on this." And yeah, so it's just like you said, it's like a domino that just seems to drop, and it's exciting. It's exciting. It also is like it definitely helps think about the rest of the year in a little more of broad strokes and go, okay, so this is, how we were talking about that 12-week year
Yeah.
planning process that you put in. So it immediately kicked into high gear of, okay, so what's the next 3 months going to look like for us? What do we do for the next 12 weeks on each project, and what are sort of the milestones that we want to hit for each project for the next 12 weeks, knowing what we have in front of us, and then mapping that out and then going, okay, so that takes us from April 1st to the end of June. Then what? And going from there. What about you? What's been going on with you?
The last couple of weeks, I've just been actually a bit of in this creative slump where, when I finish a script or I finish a project and then I'm in between, and I'm not really sure what to work on. It takes me a second to just get creative again, and because I'm not sure which direction I want to go. But then in the last week, I came up with all of these ideas for a new micro budget feature, this other really interesting project that I'm not going to even really mention because I don't know when we're going to pull this off, but I'm very excited about it. And yeah, there's just a lot been going on. And then this other script idea that's more on the studio side, because you know me, like I have my indie side and everything that we've talked about here, but then I still have to keep up the TV pilot work and, possibly writing a studio feature or what would be produced by a studio because it's just a large scale thing. So it's about
Right.
balancing all of these various projects. But yeah, there's a lot in the works, and I'm looking forward to getting some of them off the ground, especially later in the fall and like end of summer, beginning of fall. That's kind of the timeline that I'm looking at right now. And to your
Fantastic.
point, like going back to the 12-week structure of like, okay, what did the next 3 months look like for me? Well, now I'm
Yeah.
mapping that out right now. Okay, when can I write this script? When can I write this TV pilot?
Do you feel like with bouncing back from like sort of the bigger budget studio projects that you're sort of working on and the indie, I almost feel like there's like a secret identity in there. It's like you have to be Bruce Wayne for the studio stuff. Like you have to show up and play the game, but you can be Batman and kind of like go behind and try to develop your own inner world of like, okay, I've got this micro budget here, I've got this micro budget here, and I'm going to try to put this together maybe someday in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And with the studio feature, I'm just the writer, right? And then I know that there's a process involved in this, for better or for worse, right? You finish the script. That's going to take a few months, but then you finish the script and then you wait on your agents to send it out, and you hope that you can get some interest or some sort of attachment, and you're part of the packaging process. And that is a slow process that just takes forever. And a lot of it just comes down to luck, right? You're just rolling the dice and you're hoping you get lucky. You're hoping you get a
Mhm.
seven. Maybe that's not the best analogy. I can't remember. I haven't played craps in a while, but what you want is good luck. But when it comes to the micro budget feature, when you're writing that, you're going, okay, I have the camera, I have the sound gear. I know I can get this piece of equipment from my friends. I know I can get this location. Oh, we could shoot over here. We can use this car, and you're putting it together yourself, and you're in control of it. And it's actually, it's just so much more satisfying. Yeah, you don't have the money that your studio feature script requires, but you have much more control over this, and you know that you can actually pull this off when the time comes, and you decide, okay, I'm shooting 8 weeks from now. Let's work backwards from there and start planning this, and then putting the pieces together and getting cast, getting the rest of the gear, locations, and figuring out a post schedule as well. It's great to be able to go back and forth, because if you end up in a position where one project is kind of stagnating, you're not sure what to do, you're creatively spent, you're like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this other thing for the next day, and then it kind of revitalizes you. I remember reading a story about James Cameron did the same thing, I think, when he was writing Aliens and The Abyss. I don't know if this is true, but the story goes that on one desk in his office, he had a typewriter or computer, word processor, and he was writing Aliens. And then at another desk in his office, he had The Abyss, and he would just go back and forth between desks, typing into the scripts, and just switching back and forth, and it just kept the brain super active. Being away from something for a little while allows you to think about it. Let your subconscious process it, and then you come back and create something great.
You have to sort of hit a milestone that you can get to with the current knowledge and the sort of the creativity you have in your brain. If you know that the next door is going to require a little more thought process, whatever you want to call it, like taking two steps backwards to take a step forward, you can kind of stop there, pick up another project, and try to move that to the next milestone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, great. So why don't we dive into the main portion of today's episode, which is going to be a lot of fun, because over the last few weeks and months, we've heard from all of our listeners, and the support has been amazing. So first of all, thank you to everybody who's listening all around the world. Germany, we know you seem to like the show, so that's great, and it's just it's inspiring, it's motivational, and to hear the feedback from some of the things that we've talked about, and how you're applying that to your own work is just really really cool to hear. Part of that, though, has been that we've received a bunch of questions over the last weeks and months, and so we thought we'd compile some of those questions and answer them here on the show. And so we're going to just do a little Q&A episode and hopefully cover a lot of ground, and answer some of those burning questions that listeners might have.
Let's take it on. What is the biggest red flag to watch out for before accepting an independent project? And I'm going to presume this is referring to like accepting work on an independent project, or picking or like taking a job working on an indie film.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're maybe a crew member, or some other creative position, maybe even coming on board as a producer or something like that. Yeah, what
Right.
what are
Yeah.
some red flags to watch out for? So, gut reaction. What do you think?
I would say right from the get go, like an unfinished script would be, I think, one of the biggest
Yeah,
concerns. So a script that's not, and I think we've talked about this before, a script that's not ready to go yet. And that can be that the story's just not clear yet. We're not quite sure where it's going to go. Like if the idea is there, it's great, but it needs more work. And whether or not you or I or a producer is the right person to put that extra work in to take the script to that next level, that's a question you have to ask yourself. Now, as a crew member, I definitely would say, like, if there's an unfinished script, there's a lot of problems that can happen there. When I get a script as an assistant director, as a production manager, and they tell me this is just a skeleton or it's going to go undergo a bunch of rewrites soon, I go, okay, well, call me when that's happened, because there's no
yeah,
point in us even starting until this happens.
yeah, totally.
What about you?
That's a great point. I think also, look at the team, who's reaching out to you, and what's their track record, depending on where you are and the local industry. Do people know them? Can you ask for references on how their movies have gone in the past, or how their productions have been? One of the things too, like, if they're saying, well, no, this is a super cheap project, nobody's getting paid, ask about food. Honestly, like, are we getting fed? because if you're not paying somebody, you better be spending a bunch of money on good food. You got to keep your army fed. And that's the only way that you're going to really get support on the day, is like making sure people have energy, giving them what they need. Just those little things go a long way, right? Keeping
I
people
would,
comfortable.
yeah, and I would really harp on that because that's one of the food, we laugh about this, but what the question you should ask really is, if they're paying you low, ask what their plan is for food. Ask what their plan is for the set. Like, are they planning to have catering on set and so on? Like, because if they haven't thought of that yet, that means they're not thinking of the basically the crew welfare as a whole. What else haven't they considered in this? Is because if they haven't thought of how is the crew going to get fed, it's kind of a red flag of, okay, so you're just kind of hoping people are just going to show up and work for 12 to 16 hours. I think it's like you judge people a little bit by the quality of the work they've done on the little things.
Yeah, and on that note, like production schedule, right? Are we shooting 5 days? Do you expect to do 6 days in a row? I just heard a horror story the other day about an indie feature shooting like 12 days straight. And,
Mhm.
that is the fastest way to burn a whole bunch of bridges. Because even if you're
For
working
sure.
with your friends, at a certain point, it's also just a case of diminishing returns. Like, I really believe after 12 hours, you are not nearly as productive if you just put in a solid straight 9-hour day or something like that. That's why I love shooting in the industry. We call it like French hours, or here in Vancouver, Pacific Northwest hours, where you start and you have, I believe it's 9 hours total, but you don't break for lunch. And instead, you kind of just spell people off to go eat. And then you're
Yeah.
constantly working and constantly shooting. And so you end up having a shorter, but I think more productive shooting day versus shooting for 6 hours, breaking for a 1 hour lunch, and then shooting for another 5 or 6 hours. Because those first 2 hours coming back from lunch are so slow. Everybody's full of food. They've been resting for 45 minutes to an hour. You lose all momentum,
Yeah.
and it's a slog. So think about
Yeah.
how the production is actually going to be working, and are they night shoots? How is all of this going to work? So if I was being hired as a sound person or hair makeup or costume designer by an indie production, I would be asking a lot of production related questions, and making sure that I'm going to be treated fairly.
Look, like a lot of this is just evidence of lack of thought so far, and it doesn't mean you don't take the job. It just means that know what you're getting into, or if you're a producer being asked to help with the script, know that you've got a lot of work to do before you get to even the point of thinking about shooting it.
Okay, so question number 2: where does everyone go for money that aren't government grants?
Ah, yes, this is a fun one.
Where do you get the
So
money, Anthony? Where do we go
where
for
do you
money?
get the money? The first place you're ever going to get help for an independent film is from your friends and your family. Honestly, most of the films that I've worked on that were not funded by the government, didn't get any kind of telefilm money, that didn't get any kind of like distribution money or anything like that. It was friends and family or your own savings. So you're taking a look at what can you put together that, and everybody says don't use your credit card, and of course you talk to every single filmmaker who ever made it, like the Duplass brothers or Chris Nolan or anything like that. They all spent their own money to make their own project.
Yeah, I agree. It depends on the scale of your movie, right? So if you're making a $2 million feature, well, friends and family aren't going to get you very far because,
Right.
again, unless you have that rich uncle that can help you out. But most of us don't. Like if you're making a short film, I did this with the Dukabor. Start a crowdfunding campaign. Seed and Spark is our recommendation. It's a great platform, and then use that to go to friends and family because all of the information's there. You've made a cool, slick video. It's a great way to convince people rather than you just going to your relatives hat in hand and saying, "Hey, can you give me $500 or $1,000?" or more, depending on how much you need for your film. So crowdfunding is another way to raise money for your film that isn't a grant. Another way that I've looked at this is like I kind of just went through my contact list and
Right. Yeah.
and I just started scrolling through my contact list, like names and people that I haven't spoken to in years even. I would put them into a tracking spreadsheet, and I started to just see, okay, how can I reach out to them? What's the best way to reach out to them? And honestly, most of them are cold emails, and they're business people that I met in the past or other producers or, just random contacts. And some of them got back to me and they seemed interested in the movie. And one of the main investors that we're talking to right now, it was a coffee that I had over 2 years ago. So I spent 45 minutes to an hour with this person and hadn't spoken to them since that coffee, reached out to them, and now they're one of the many investors that we're talking to for this film. And so you just don't know, but you want to just go into your Rolodex, put all the names down, and see who is the best for your film. And one last thing I'll say about that is don't just like shotgun blast everybody. Find the connectors. Because I keep hearing these stories about people on LinkedIn message 100 people a day or whatever it is, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's actually a good system, but what you want to do is find the people who are the connectors, the ones that are connected to the ones that have money, because they can
Yeah.
introduce you to 10 people and then it's a meaningful connection rather than a cold email or DM.
There's always that whole thing of like, if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. So
Right.
people who go out asking for money all the time from people, I think there's a bit of there's definitely a diminishing returns part to that. And this comes back to that whole Mark Duplass thing of, the cavalry isn't coming, so it's up to you. That means like you going out and waiting for that investor who has the money to decide that you're worthy of their investment might not be the best approach, especially when you're first starting out or especially when you're first get going. Now, if you've already made a couple of films, you've had some festival traction, then you are walking in with a little bit of house money. You're reinvesting your goodwill, you're reinvesting money that you might have made from your last film into your next film. And you're building that trust with the community. So that's where I think that the money comes from. Like you said, like friends and family aren't going to fund a $2 million movie, and crowdfunding is a hard one to fund a $2 million movie. So
Yeah.
I think you have to be open to the idea of like start with what you can do.
That question kind of folds into our next question, which is
Right.
what are the best ways to get investors?
Finding investors starts with developing relationships with people. You mentioned it, I think, in the last question. Look for people who are connectors. So look for people. You know, not very few of us know like a millionaire, for example, but you probably know a person who knows a millionaire, or you probably know a person who has a friend who's connected to this person, or so on. You need to spend and invest the time in developing good, solid relationships with people that are not built just transactionally. I think that's a good point to start with. What have you done to get investors?
Well, okay, so we talked about, reaching out to people in your contacts list, finding the connectors. Part of this question to me also is just like, what's the best way to convince an investor to come on board, right? So,
Right.
yeah, one is your own track record. If you've never ever made a movie before, why would I invest in your movie, right? So make short films, get awards, go to festivals, network, get people on your side, understanding that you know how to make a movie. That's the first
Mhm.
step, right? As you mentioned in a previous episode, like if you want to make the $200,000 movie, make the $20,000 movie or make the $2,000 movie. It's all about scalability. And so an investor has to believe that when they give you $100,000, that money's actually going to be spent properly and with their best interests in mind,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Another way in is the actual package itself. So you have to have a business plan. You have to have some sort of investor deck, business plan, whatever you want to call it, but like a pitch deck type thing. And that should be a pretty extensive document, both creative and covering the business side. You should have a budget for your movie. How much are you receiving in tax credits? What sort of gap financing do you need? How much do you expect the investor to put in? If you're saying we need $1 million movie and you are seeking $1 million to make this movie in private equity, you're probably not going about this the right way, because there are, depending on where you are in the world, let's just take Canada as an example, and certain states in the United States, the tax credits are great. So, like, why would I, for $1 million movie in Canada, why would I actually need $1 million in private equity when I can probably get away with 500,000, 550,000 in private equity, and the rest could be tax credits, right?
Mm.
So make sure that you are going about this the proper way. That's about the team building aspect, right? So what we talked about in our development episode about the production partners that you have on board that attracts investors to believe that you have a great team. The last point I'll make about this is like the verbal pitch itself. You're not pitching a 20-minute and then type story to the investor with your movie idea. You're pitching a 3 to 5 minute pitch that covers everything, and then getting into a discussion and allowing them to believe that you know what you're doing. And that's really the key. It's just about building that relationship, and it's going to take a lot of time. You're going to pitch, they're not going to say yes right away. If they do, it's actually probably a red flag in my mind. It kind of takes a little bit of time to develop this relationship, and they have to think about it, because if they're willing to just jump in without really thinking much about it, well, what's going to happen later when they decide to change their mind, or maybe they don't have the money or
And they
whatever it
probably
is.
will.
And they probably
Yeah,
will
and they
change their
probably
mind.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the floor is littered with investor promises that have never come to fruition because they said, "Oh, I'll give you." I've had several, even just for Quiet Canadians, where they've said, "Oh, I want to put a sizable amount of investment into the film." You said, "Great," like that with unprompted,
Yeah.
and you go, "Okay, great, let's have a meeting." And you spend the next 5 months trying to set up a simple meeting to have to have a discussion about what that will all mean, and they ghosted you.
Yeah. Yeah. The ghosting, such a classic move
Okay.
now.
You mentioned something earlier about the craps thing. Realistically, like if you roll dice enough times, you're going to get to a set. You're going to hit a seven, right? Like if you just
Yeah.
keep rolling dice, you're going to hit a seven. This, I think, is the game with investors. It's about you have to be willing to put yourself out there as many times as possible. If someone who you think has possible resources or the ability to connect you or something reaches out or responds to your own reach out, your DM or whatever it is on LinkedIn, or if you DM someone, you take the meeting. You know, if you have to take like 15-minute Zoom calls every day just to see who's out there and who's, this sounds weird to say it, but who's biting, like what fish are biting. You need to put your line in the water in order to make sure that people are to find the right people. You cannot just sit there and say, I have a project, come find me. It really is a proactive stance. So that means also, like, if people ask you about your film, if you go to a party and you don't expect to meet any investors at a party or whatever it is, or you go to a social event or you're in a running group or whatever it is, and people ask you what you're up to, talk about your film in an interesting way, but not in a way that you're pitching the film. So
Yeah.
just go like, oh, I'm making a movie right now. It's a spy film. You're making a movie. You know, it's like just talk about it a little bit, make it interesting, make it, learn to speak passionately about what you're working on, and that's the pitch itself. You don't have to sit there and say, and by the way, we have investors and blah blah blah, we have all this thing coming up. It's like if they're interested, they'll ask you that question. If they have the means, they'll go like, oh, that might be interesting. But you have to have kicks at the can, you have to roll the dice, you have to put lines in the water, whatever metaphor you want to use. You have to put yourself out there in order to have any chance of success, especially in getting an investor, because there isn't a line of investors waiting to invest in movies.
It really is a numbers game, and you
Yeah.
just have to have more at bats. It's very simple,
Yeah.
right?
And be a friendly and engaging person. Like, honestly, like you can be an introvert, but you still have to be like an interested or interesting person. Okay, so question number 4 is, how can we get an all spend tax credit for 100% Canadian independent films?
Okay, so this is a great question. This is something that we have been talking about with other filmmakers, and we think it's a very important subject matter right now, with the Canadian election going on, and Buy Canada, and all of these issues that are coming up with the trade wars. How can we bolster the domestic film industry here in Canada? But what this question is actually asking is, like, I believe this is what it's asking: if the movie is 100% Canadian, how can we lobby the Canadian government to give us an all spend tax credit versus what is normally done with a tax credit, which is that it applies to labor costs. So if you have $2 million for a movie and you spend 50% of that on labor, then you're going to ask for a tax credit on the $1 million, and there's caps involved and stuff like that. But that's sort of how a tax credit normally works. You don't get a tax credit on your equipment rental normally. But in this case, if it's a 100% Canadian film, a low budget indie, and we can prove that it's a Canadian film and we can prove that it's all above board, how can we go about getting a tax credit? Well, we have to lobby the government. We have to start, calling our MPs and getting the support behind something like this, and figuring out tax shelters or tax codes to modify to help independent filmmakers and incentivize private investors to invest in movies like this.
Because the money that you're spending on the film is supporting local business, is basically the idea.
Yeah.
Is that we're not just paying the crew, but we're paying for the rentals, the vendors, the hotels, the food, and everything like that, like getting that part kind of taken into account when we apply for Canadian tax credits. Now the thing is that there are provinces like Nova Scotia who already do this. So they have a 25% all spend tax credit, on expenses within the province of Nova Scotia. Everything you spend while in the province of Nova Scotia is a tax credit or can be claimed as a tax credit. And then they even have like they have a Halifax region for that. And then if you go with outside, and I don't know, I know they changed it recently. If you go like 100 kilometers outside of Halifax to film, they add another 1 or 2% to your tax credit, again, for like spending money in the province of Nova Scotia. So that's kind of what we're talking about here with regards to the all spend tax credit. So
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at places like that, and there's good. The great part about this is we can see what the results will be from that. It does that bolster the industry? Does that help build a thriving film community? And I don't know, but somebody told me that Newfoundland also has a similar process, that they might also be doing it. And so, like right now, you've got these sort of regional locations and regional provinces that are already doing something very similar. And what we want to do is apply it to Canada, just make it a Canadian nationwide. And so, I guess it then comes down to having a system and a way of verification and a way to make sure that there isn't any fraud going on for this. Like you said, lobbying the government, getting people in front of the finance minister and the minister of culture, or whoever is in charge of film in Canada once that's put into place.
Yeah, and we should know who these people are. Well, maybe by the time this episode's airing, because I think the
Yeah,
election will be over. But there are so many different ways to put a tax credit system in place that incentivizes low budget indie filmmaking and private investment. One other way to do that would be to change the federal tax code to be more to be similar to the United States tax code, which is Section 181, which allows a private investor to write off 100% of their investment within the same calendar year of the investment itself. So, meaning
right.
if I put in $1 million, I can write off that full $1 million within that same year. Where right now in Canada, you have to sort of wait until the film is done, released, and find out if it's making a profit or not. Are you actually taking losses or are you generating revenue? And that takes a long time, and it's not a great incentive for anyone to put in money at a large scale into an independent film. But this would
Right.
change that. And
Yeah.
obviously, there are caps involved. If the movie can't be more than, say, $15 million in the United States, and in our case, even a $4 million Canadian film is kind of a big budget Canadian film. So working with all of these different systems, the tax shelter idea is a great idea. It obviously had a lot of abuse when it was in place a couple decades ago, but there are ways to fix that, and it would absolutely help the Canadian industry.
The overall, I think, message from this is, in addition to doing your own work to get investors, because effectively what we do have to do is make sure that we show that this industry is value to Canada and that supporting it helps Canadians, and also to make it so that investors and people who want to put money into it have some level of incentivization to make it work.
Totally. Okay, next question. Should you focus on making movies that will sell, like horror or faith films, or make passion movies at the start of your career?
Well, I think you always should be making passion movies, because until someone's basically paying you to go to work, any project that you initiate yourself should always be something that you're going to be 100% passionate about. If you don't like horror films, don't make horror films. People want to invest and want to participate in and want to get behind a filmmaker who's passionate about what they're making. So that would be my main answer, would be just like, it should always be a passion project. And if you can find a way to make your passion project in a marketable genre, that's kind of a 1 plus 1 equals 3 thing. But don't just get into the genre because you think it's the where the market is. Because by the time your film is finished, it's going to be 3 to 5 years from now, and who knows? Like maybe westerns are back in, maybe science fiction is back in. Who knows?
Yeah, you really
What do you think?
can't chase the market. And if you're looking at what's out there right now or what's being released, it's kind of the equivalent of like looking at the night sky, right? When you look at stars in the sky, you're actually looking back in time because those stars may have already died, but the light is only getting to our eyes now. And so when you look at what's in the movie theater, well, those movies were greenlit 2, 3 years ago, right? And
Mhm.
it's taken a long time to get these movies into the theaters today. And so you can't chase the market that way. Even if you're reading Deadline and you see that like 5 horror movies just got picked up in a spec sale, well, already that's too late because those scripts were probably written months and months ago, and the deals have taken a long time to close, and now the announcement has come out. So don't chase the market. The other thing about this is that you really have to fall in love with whatever you're working on because it is going to be a 2 to 3 year process for you. So if you hate horror movies, it's going to show. It's going to just be a shitty horror film. Like, don't do it, right? Fall in love with what you're working on. And if you are passionate about it and you're enthusiastic about it, that's going to help sell the movie. Enthusiasm helps sell projects, and it's contagious.
Exactly. And the thing is that if you don't like horror films or you don't like the type of genre that you're working in, what will happen is what will come out is you'll just fall to cliche. You'll fall to the cliches and the
Yeah.
tropes and you won't come up with anything new. Like what I love the spy film genre. So when we're putting together the movie that we're putting together, I'm looking for ways to build on it, to do something unique and interesting, taking into account all the things I love about the spy movie genre and the spy thriller genre, but then adding like the twist that I would want to see, like the kind of thing that I would want to my own stamp on this kind of a project. Whereas if you don't love it, you're kind of going to just go, okay, well, horror films have to have a scare every 8 minutes and blah 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 blah. It's like that kind of thing, and you start to just fall into the cliche just so that you can have that quote unquote movie finished. And one more thing I'll add to this is there's a great story about Brian Glazier and Ron Howard making Splash, and what happened was is they were developing Splash, which is one of the first movies that they really made together, and they had this project, and they were trying to sell it to everybody, and everybody was like, no, this is a dumb idea, and blah 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 blah, and then they finally got Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah attached to it, but at that time they weren't like names. And then they brought it to, I can't remember which studio, but they brought it to a studio after all these no's. And then the studio said, great idea. The only thing is we're developing a similar mermaid story. And so they said, well, we can't do it because there's going to be a competing project and we've got already got this big guy. Oh, Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty was the lead in it, right?
Okay.
And they're like, well, we can't do it because Warren Beatty's a big name and he's going to make this film. So Ron Howard and Brian Glazer, they were like, well, we still want to see if we can keep this film going. So they tried to develop it more, and they found like a micro, at that time, what would have been like independent sort of financing to kind of put the project together. And then when they finally had it ready to go, the Warren Beatty project had fallen apart, and that project never happened. And then Splash happened. And so
Interesting. Yeah.
by sticking to it, sticking to a project that they believed in, that they thought was going to work. And the funny part is, of course, they took a studio, or they took a note from someone who said, you know, you need to make it more of a romantic film. And that kind of like clicked the zeitgeist for them, and they made this change, and then the film was ready. And that's what basically, if I mean, I won't put words in their mouth, but they would probably say that that's one of the films that launched their
Oh, it
career
did, totally.
as
Yeah. Because even before that,
so
Ron Howard was trying to get a directing career in Hollywood, and nobody would take him seriously because
no
of
one would
Happy
take
Days, and he was a TV
right.
director, and, this was the thing that really helped him, so that's interesting,
Yeah.
that's a really cool story. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so next question. Shorts or features? How do I know when I'm ready to make the leap?
Well, what's your answer to this? Or do you have an answer to this?
For sure, if you've never made a film before, make a short film, right? You have to get pretty good at being able to tell a short story if people are going to trust you to tell a long story. If you can
Yeah.
move somebody in 5 minutes or 10 minutes and make them feel something, make them laugh, make them cry, make them scared, well, then chances are you're on your way to be able to do that over the course of 90 minutes. At a certain point, though, you have to make the leap. And so I'll use myself as an example right now. I have made a number of short films, 5 in the last 3 years. And my last short film had a massive budget. Like my massive, it was such a massive budget. I wanted to make a feature with it, and I could have, but we weren't
Yeah.
allowed to because of the way the grant structure worked. But it's a big short film. It's 17 or 16 minutes long, and I've sort of done all I could in the short film space at this point. So now I know I'm ready to make a feature, and I'm going to take the time to do that properly. At the same time, if you have $50,000 kicking around, make a feature. Because like look at
Right.
the guy, his name escapes me, who made Skinamarink. 21 years old,
Right.
he had $16,000 or something like that, and he made this movie with him. It was just him and a couple friends, and that launched his career. So you don't need to make a short film, but a short film is great training ground to make that feature, your first feature, that much better.
Yeah. If you're gonna try to practice and learn and develop your voice with short films, make a lot of them, or make as many of them as you need to in order to get to the confidence that you need to jump to that next level. Because what I've seen a lot of people do is or what I've seen a few people do is they spend like 2 to 3 years putting together a short film and put all their eggs into that one short film basket, and then they're 2 to 3 years in on that film, like then the festivals come into play and so on, and then they start their next short film. And I'm like, well, you're going to spend 10 years making 3 shorts or
It
four
takes so
shorts.
much work to make a short film. It takes just as much work, basically, to make a short film as it does to make a feature because all
Right.
of the prep time is the same, right? The only
Yeah.
difference is how long you're actually shooting and how long your post production is. But
And
all
how
of
much
that
money you're
prep
spending.
work is exactly then the money. But it's so much work. My short film, The Dukabor, I wish we could have just made a feature, but like it took so much work, so much time. And if we just shot for an extra 10 days, we could have had a feature out of it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And the thing, and so then you use that to like hone your skills, hone your craft, and a feature is going to require basically the same as your short film. The feature is going to require the exact same amount of work times three.
Yeah.
Like every day is going to be the same. Like every day on your set, I imagine, was like a feature film day on a set. So
Yeah.
you'd have to extrapolate out to like 2 to 3 to 4 more weeks depending on what your film requires. I would say like make shorts, but make lots of them, and churn them around as quickly. Like the moment that you finish the short, get it into post, and the moment it's finished, you start applying to festivals. If you're not ready to jump to a feature, start thinking about your next short. If you're going to use it as a practice ground, you need to have a body of work. For you to convince other people, again, to get to that feature level, to convince people to give you the shot to make a feature, you've got to be willing to put in the hard work of like doing many, many, many shorts. We did kind of the opposite thing where we made a couple of shorts and then we decided we wanted to make a feature, but we knew we could do it for like super cheap. And we basically were like, okay, how much would we have to save to do this right? And we did that, and then we did a little bit of crowdfunding and got enough money to make the project work. That was an avenue that we chose to leap straight into features. Coming from assistant directing background, coming from having worked in the industry for a while, having known of like logistically how to put this together, we knew how to put it together in a way that we could do it and manage it and get it done.
Yeah, you had years
Um,
of experience to already draw from, right? So it,
right.
it just it really depends on your own journey and where you are at. If you've worked in the industry for 20 years, well, you're going to know a lot more than people who are just, out of film school or barely even in film school or something like that, who are, trying to make a short film themselves. So
And,
you have to
and play
feel
the
ready to take on a feature before you do it.
and play the long game. Like this is not a there's no one film that's going to launch your career. As much as everybody says there's the one movie is going to launch your career, it's like no one film is going to launch your career. I mean, it does for that handful of like tiny tiny little people out there that get that one film that launches their career, but most people don't launch their career off one film. Sean Baker, who just won an Oscar, has made a lot of movies before he won an Oscar and
Yeah.
before people would give him lots of money to or give him enough money to make a feature, and he still made that movie for what we would arguably say is relatively cheap for a film.
Yeah.
But he made lots of well-made movies before people would give him a shot, before he started getting studio money.
And even this Skinamarink example that I gave, like the guy won the lottery. Like let's be very clear. Or Paranormal Activity, that guy won the lottery. It's not the industry doesn't work that way. It was a fluke chance that the right person saw the film at the right time that then led to $1 million deal for Skinamarink. He made the film well, but normally it doesn't work that way. And Paranormal Activity was a complete fluke again that it just timed out perfectly. It was very lucky, and then it exploded. So you can't look at Paranormal Activity and say, well, they made that movie for $10,000 or $15,000. That's all I need to make $100 million at the box office. You need a lot of things to fall into place. So just
Yeah,
focus on the craft, make your film as good as it can be, and then make the next film, and then the next film.
yeah.
And eventually, that film that you make will be the one that launches your career. But you have to keep making films.
There's always that thing of like be first, be good, or cheat. Like Paranormal Activity they were the first people to do a movie like that, and they made it good, and so that's what worked.
Okay, next question. Should you get script coverage or a story editor? Or do you have any other suggestions for getting feedback on a script? Okay, where are you at on
Mhm.
this?
I think this is a mixed bag of.
Yeah.
I think the best thing you can do is have a trusted group of 2 to 3 people that you really go to, that you can get honest feedback that is not going to be biased, that's not going to be and so on. If you can find 2 to 3 people, they don't have to be story editors, but just people like industry people or producers or actors or people who can give you honest feedback, and you can find that trusted group of people, that's worth it for me to get feedback on. I wouldn't pay for a story editor or for script coverage that in an effort to make my film better until I found that trusted group of 2 to 3 people to read my story.
So like feedback is the most important thing. You need feedback. And so I completely agree with you, Anthony. Like you need the trusted group of people who are going to be super honest with you. Like don't have
Yeah.
people in your circle that will tell you that your script is always great. Like I want people to tell me that something sucks so that I can make it better.
Yep.
You really need to tear these things apart. Don't be precious about anything. That's really, really important. When it comes to script coverage, hiring a story editor, I've done it in the past. I've used the Blacklist and who else? I think that was sort of the main one, but it's now over $100 for a
Yeah.
reader. And honestly, most of the time I disagreed with their notes and I disagreed with their feedback. And the big controversy now, and I'm not saying that the Blacklist is doing this, but in general, the big thing to watch out for is just AI feedback. Like I've
Yeah.
read some of the feedback that people have received in their packages, and they've paid a lot of money for this, and I'm like, that's written by AI. Like, there's
Yep.
no way. Even if a reader just put their points into a ChatGPT or Claude and then use that and send that back to you, I still think that's super shitty. I think that like I'm paying $100. I want to know exactly what you think in your voice. What did you
Yep.
think about my movie? Don't give it to AI because it's going to be altered. Be honest. So basically, if you're paying for AI feedback, just spit it into AI yourself and get feedback that way.
If you're going to these AI resources, and I'm not saying that, like, I think there's some value in some of the stuff where it's like they analyze your audience demographics and things like that, where they can give you that kind of data. That kind of information might be useful from the AI standpoint. But the sheer fact of getting feedback on on is your script good, or like what are the key moments in your script that are good, I think like that like what do you get? What does an AI give you that you can use other than
Yeah.
validation from a robot? Like you said, I want someone to tell me my script sucks, but eventually I want someone to tell me, "Wow, this is good. You have to make this film." Because that's the goal. The goal is to get to a point where someone is saying, "This script is solid. It needs to be made." And that you can only get from getting human being looking at it and going, and someone like you saying, someone you trust, someone who's honest, someone who's like, "Look, this is good."
But that comes from working with people in a group, from getting an honest human reaction from actors or directors or
Exactly.
producers, and that's the best way to go about this. So to answer the question, like find people in your local industry, whether that are, you're in a film school class or go, reach out, go to a networking events, film festivals, find people and start building little writers groups, and
Yep.
and go about it that way. So no, I would say completely avoid any sort of paid coverage of any kind for your script. It's just at this point, it's not worth it. Okay, next question. Can you share a moment when everything went wrong on set and how you recovered from it?
Yeah, well, this is a whole episode, I think. But one off the top of my head was
Sure.
we were filming this is when I was as an assistant director. We're filming in Kamloops. It was an independent series, and we were supposed to film at the Kamloops International Airport. We were going to actually have a scene where an ambulance drives down the runway. Now you have to coordinate with everybody when you're filming on a runway, like it's or
Yeah.
in an airport and stuff. Transport Canada, everybody. So you have to like there's a lot of hoops to go through. So we had it all planned. We talked about it for weeks. We had the entire plan laid out. We had our liaison at the airport ready to go, and they give you the all clear, and you have like a window of maybe like 20 minutes for it to work, and then you're done because they have to let airplanes land. So we had this window of time that we could use, and we were like, okay, so we're ready to go. Everybody's lined up. I'm sitting there on my walkie, like, okay, blah, 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 blah. Cars are in place. And then a private plane crashes into the runway,
What?
like
What?
a minute before we're supposed to go to camera. Yeah,
Crashes?
crashes on fire.
Oh my God.
And so, okay, so I can tell the story because nobody died. So it's like everybody
Oh,
was
thank
okay.
God. Okay.
They had some trouble. They came in and they clipped their wing on the runway and just spun over. It was a tiny little like one propeller plane. Everything's off. Liaison is now like, okay, you guys are shut down. We have to investigate. We have to do everything. Fire trucks have to go out. There's no
There's
there's
no
no
filming
film
happening
shoot.
at this point.
There's no
Yeah.
filming happening at this point. All right, so now we're like, okay, so we have all these people around. What can we do? And we had to basically go, okay, well, we have a whole bunch of scenes tomorrow that are supposed to take place in one of the hangars, private hangar. And basically, what we can do is we can go to the private hangar, the small part that's on private property that we can do that leads up to the private hangar. So like off the Kamloops Airport towards our thing. So we have like almost like the parking lot in front of the hangar,
Sure.
but it's
Yeah.
also like beyond the parking lot is the runway. So
Yeah.
it's like there's a moment where you're on airport authority, and then there's a moment where you're on private property, but it's like it's basically a paved road. And so we're like, okay, well, so we sat there, like me, the producers, the director, and the DP, and we're like, okay, so what can we do to get parts of this scene in case we can't go back, because we might not be able to go and get that ever,
Yeah.
because it took us weeks just to organize for this 20-minute window. And we sat there for like 10 minutes and rewrote the entire day, redid the entire schedule, and went, okay, which actors are here? We don't have the actor we need for tomorrow because they're not supposed to be working today. We were like, okay, so can we dress someone in their outfit and shoot the coverage off of them? And then so we made sure the costume was available and blah 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 blah. So we shot like basically 90% of the scene
Yeah.
that we could shoot, and then the next day we just shot the coverage of the actor who wasn't there. And then we moved on. We had a very light day the next day. In a moment of time, you're kind of like sitting there as a thing going like everything's gone to shit in a hurry, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like, and everybody's just like, okay, what are we going to do? And as an AD, everybody's kind of looking like, well, now what? One.
Wow,
Do you have one?
that's
I've
crazy.
I've
I do have one.
20
So a
others,
few
but
years ago, it was the first short film that I directed after, being, like I said, I've my TV background. I'm a professional writer, and I was like, I want to get back into directing, so I'm going to make a short. And so it was this sci-fi short that I didn't write, but I was directing. My friend wrote it, and the lead actress of the movie, they co-wrote it together. And it was this like sort of time travel piece, but basically a lot of it took place on this beach, and we found this really perfect beach area, and we didn't have a permit or anything because we're run and gun short film. It's going to be fine. I stupidly misread the tide chart, and so I was like, okay, at this time it's going to be fine. We can shoot here for a few hours. It'll be totally fine. No, no, no. I read that like a week in advance, and of course the Earth moves around in the solar system, and things change in the moon. So we got there and we started to set up, and it was just perfect. And Simone, the lead actor, she was standing near the water at her mark, and I was setting up the camera, and then she took a step back, and I'm like, no, no, Simone, like I need you to step forward a little bit. She's like, I can't. The water's coming up. I was like, okay. And then I realized the water's coming up very quickly. And I didn't realize how quickly tides rise.
yeah, yeah,
Within 45 minutes, we had to like rush out of there because our entire film set got swallowed up by the ocean.
yep,
And I was like, what are we going to do? This is the only day that we can come out here to shoot. And so we found little pockets of forest and like rocky beach that kind of looked similar to where we were. This was maybe 500 meters away, and I just threw it on a longer lens, threw the background out of focus, and we managed to shoot a whole bunch of the scene. Same thing as your story, right? You just pick up what you can and kind of hope it'll cut together. And so that's what we ended up doing. Is I got a few shots on the main set, and then everything else turned into like long lens close-ups and all of that. So I learned a valuable lesson about reading tide charts that shoot,
yes.
and yeah, never made that mistake again.
I've done 2 movies where tides were, like, the main factor in the film, so I get it.
Yeah.
It's the thing where, and you can't fight that because it's like it's not like you can put something in front of it to block it or something.
No, no. Okay, next question. What technical skills should new filmmakers prioritize learning versus what they should plan to delegate to specialists?
2 technical skills I think you need to learn, and I think again, and then I think you should learn how to edit, and I think you should learn how to write. Like, those are the 2 things you need to learn. You need to learn how editing works, how films get edited, and I'm again, like, once you can outsource this stuff, like, once, especially the editing, once you can get a good editor on board, that's great, but you need to know how a movie gets put together. I think every producer needs to write a screenplay, even a bad one,
Yeah.
because you've gotta know the work that goes into it. Producers just need to learn to respect the process of writing in
Yeah.
a way that that they can't just sit there and think to themselves, "Oh, you just throw like index cards against a wall and
Yeah,
move
it's
them
like,
around, and then you've
you
got a
hear it all the time,
story.
like my hairdresser's like, "Oh, you're a writer. I have so many ideas for movies." I'm like,
Yes,
"Sure,
exactly.
everybody has ideas, but try to actually write it into a, compelling, emotionally engaging story with
Yeah.
structure and theme and character." No, it's very difficult, and, yeah, that's a great skill to learn, and if you're just a director who directs and you don't write, I think you're selling yourself short. You
Yeah.
have to learn how to write. I agree about the editing side of things, for sure. Knowing how to, again, editing is writing, but with visual and
Mhm.
sonic mediums, right? So those are really important skills. I think it's good as a director to know a little bit about everything, but not enough to like really get you in trouble. So like learn how sound design works, right? Like
Yep.
learn a little bit about special effects and the art department. Study art, study color, study lighting. Here's a very simple trick that everyone should know when you're shooting outside. One, always shoot into the sun. It will look better. Never,
Mhm.
ever, ever shoot anything, any scene, it doesn't matter, never with the sun behind you. It'll look so flat, it'll be boring, right? There's no way to make it look good in color. Just always adjust your actors, do whatever you have to do so that the sun is behind them and backlighting them. I guarantee you you will have a better looking image than you thought. So like just understand how light works. There are all these
Yeah.
little things. But then obviously you're going to have a great director of photography hopefully on your film. You're going to have a good editor, you're going to have a good sound designer, but just know enough so that you can talk to them about these things, but not enough
Yeah.
where you think you know more than them.
You're not there to prescribe the technical how to light the scene. As a producer, or as a director, you need to know how you want it lit. Like, and that's a bit of a technical difference, but it's a semantic difference. But it is true. It's like, I want this to be like, what is high key versus low key? What is, like, just knowing like what you're the mood you're trying to go for in the scene, and knowing how to speak that language to your DP so that your DP can execute on it.
Well, that's the key. I was
With
going to say you have to be able to speak the same language. And that's the one of the benefits of film school is that you get a technical training that you really wouldn't have otherwise had, or it would have just been much more difficult to achieve. So like when I graduated from film school and I started working in a production office, I was the office PA. I was just dealing with paperwork and whatever. But when I was in the kitchen and the DP would come in, I could talk to him about film stock or, just certain very technical camera techniques or just about cameras in general or lenses because I knew how they worked. And obviously, the DP knows much more than I do about this, but it was a way to just have a conversation and build relationships. The other great thing about film school just goes back to like find that circle of people that you can have as trusted readers. That's really what it's about, is about networking. Also learn just when to really like leave it to the experts, right? And
yeah,
learn you can't learn anything if you're the one talking, and
yep.
so the reason why we bring these people on board is because they are the experts in their field. So take from them, right? Be open to suggestions, and the movie will be greater than the sum of its parts in that way.
But when you learn to talk with your departments, but learn to listen to what they have to give you, they're there to make the film the best it can be from their perspective. So your cinematographer is thinking about all the things that you don't have time to think about. And they're there to comment on that, right? Like to give you good feedback on what you're looking for can be achieved in this way, as opposed to maybe the way you were thinking it was going to be achieved.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have time for one more question. How has your approach to indie filmmaking evolved over your career, and what do you wish you knew when starting out?
What has really evolved for me is going from a permission based structure of trying to get films made to being an active structure of getting films made. I'm approaching everything now from the standpoint of, what do I need to do to get this to take this to the next level, as opposed to trying to always rely on the, oh, I need to find a distributor and so on. And the one thing I've also learned is that there's a lot of industry out there that doesn't know what it's doing anymore. Everybody has advice, but nobody knows the answer.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm kind of in the same boat, right? Like I spent so many years working in production and then trying to make it as a writer, and then I became a writer and I worked in TV and I worked within the studio system, and it's all great. Like the people are amazing. The job is, it's a dream job. It's the best in the world. But I also just wish that at that same time I was more active in setting up my own projects and taking control of my career, because I thought that I thought, well, if I wrote this thing and then my agent got it and like that's how I get a job. There are so many gatekeepers involved in the traditional system, and just like Emily Best was saying, it's the pick me culture. And I just
Yep.
wish that I got out of the pick me culture a little bit earlier. And not entirely out, because like even as I said at the beginning of this episode, I'm still involved heavily in, trying to sell pilots to Netflix or in the traditional system. But now I'm spending so much of my energy, 50%, maybe more of my energy, on the indie side of things and taking control of it that way and becoming my own gatekeeper. Because then when
Yep.
my agent says, well, no, they're not reading, or this isn't a good time, this isn't a way to set this project up, the other part of my brain is going like, well, how can I do it myself? How do I bypass all of this and not ask for permission to get something off the ground? Because it's entirely
Mm-hmm.
possible. And, the clock is ticking, right? So why are we just waiting for somebody else to say yes when we can just say yes ourselves and make this another way? And I just had this conversation the other day with my writing and producing partners. We have this idea that we're very excited about, and it's unconventional and not something that we would have done even 2 or 3 years ago. But now, with where the industry is at, we're saying this is possible. We can pull this off, and we know exactly how to do it. And this is the way. And it's something that we've pitched in the past. And again, you're pitching and you're waiting for people to read a script. It takes 2 or 3 weeks sometimes for a studio executive or a producer to get back to you on a script. And most of the time, the answer is no. So now you're just wasting time, so much time for people to read your things when you could have spent those 3 weeks actually developing it further into an independent system with an independent model and getting it off the ground yourself. And so that's something that I just wish that I started, not last year, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I would have been so much further along if I had paid attention to that.
You and I both taught students at film schools and things like that. And when I get that question of like, what should I do? How do I get into the industry? My answer has evolved to that, saying, look, you've got the people you need right here in your class. Find your 5 people, find your
Yeah.
10 people, or find your people here, and make a plan to do something right away after you finish film school. Like, don't sit there and go like, okay, now I need to get a job in the industry and blah blah blah. Blah. It's like, yes, like, get work,
Yeah, get a
pay the
job. We have
bills,
to put food on the
get a
table for
job,
sure. Yeah.
yes, but in terms of your career in this creative field, the best thing you can do is start making stuff as soon as possible. And if it's, cheap stuff in a friend of yours basement one weekend that you put together, or if it's the run and gun film festival, or if it's the crazy eights, or if it's, lined up with something that's already happening in the local community you're involved in, that's great too. But just, you got to find ways to do that. You've got to find ways to build your group together. Don't look to other people to save your career, to start your career. You
Mhm.
start it, and if you're doing that regularly, like, it will start to go above the noise. I know so many people who, I went to film school 15 years ago. I know lots of people who quit 1 or 2 years out of film school. They're no longer there. But I know a couple of people who have done very well. I know one person who works in high level visual effects in the industry. I know one person who's a writer on Shonda Rhimes series.
Mhm.
Those are classmates of mine, but that's out of like 30 people in my class. That's, well, I'll count myself then, like 3 of us who are actually still actively in working because we've just stuck with it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wish we had all done after film school was, I wish we had all just decided to work on a project together, and then we could have had a film under our belt to catapult our career.
Yeah, it's so true. And, those are 10 questions that we've received from everyone, out there listening to the show. And again, we really appreciate the feedback and the questions. And if you have more, send them our way. We'll collect them and we'll do another one of these episodes, hopefully pretty soon. So if anything comes to mind, email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com and stay in touch. We love doing this, and we want to just share whatever knowledge we have, and from our guests as well. We have exciting guests coming up as well, so stay tuned.
Thanks so much, and have a great weekend, Ken.
You too. Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.